Are y'all ready for another tutorial? This is a helpful heifer pattern from the Quilted Cow. It is table topper 19. It is without a doubt my very most favorite table topper design of all time. It was a little difficult for me. I don't think it's really difficult at all, but for me, I had some issues. So stay tuned and let's walk through how I put this all together and then together and then together again. Step one is to cut out your blocks. Now, the way they tell you to do it is to cut the strip of fabric 3.5 inch by width of fabric and then cut it down into the 3.5 inch blocks. The trick here is part of this fabric will also be used for these smaller blocks. So you're going to have to reserve part of that fabric and then trim it down to make a smaller size block square. It's really not hard at all. Just know that you're going to do that before you cut it up, because sometimes I just fold and cut a bunch of blocks, but you're going to want to reserve part of your fabric for those smaller blocks on these strips. Once you get all your blocks cut out, label them. I couldn't find my cute little block labels, so I made some out of a Post-it note. You're going to also want to write those colors on your pattern so that you remember when you're laying this out. This layout is tricky. It's not hard, it's just tricky. So you have to follow it and make sure you know A is this color, B is this color, and C is this color, because it will help you because you're going to make these into half square triangles. Once you label them, start matching them per the pattern, like A goes with B, B goes with C. It's going to tell you the quantities that you need. Remember, we're making 2 at a time half square triangles, or HSTs. If you don't know what a HST or half square triangle is, look on my page for the glossary terms and it'll talk to you about what those are. Next, we're going to mark so we know where to sew for these HSTs. So I use a Fons and Porter ruler, and you just mark down either side of it and sew up those lines. If you don't have a little ruler like this, the alternative method is to draw a straight line point to point down the middle, then measure 1/4 inch on each side and then sew on those lines. Trust me on this one, just get the Fons and Porter ruler. It's a lot easier. They're available on the website of my friends at the Quilted Cow. Also, it is easier with a spinning mat like you see here, so I don't have to lift the ruler or the fabric and move it around. I just spin the mat, I draw the other line. This is real helpful when you have a bunch of these to do. Next, sew on the lines on each side. You can also chain piece it. That's what I'm attempting to do here. Little mess up, no big deal. This is where you feed the fabric in one right after the other and you don't cut the string in between. This makes it a lot faster and easier. I did forget to video sewing up the other side and then cutting. So you cut right between the two seams. So you sew each side and then you cut up the middle and you end up with 2 half square triangles from each block. I also did a live when I did the trimming of these blocks, so I don't have a video of me trimming up the blocks, but all you're going to do on those half square triangles is open them up, use a little ruler, a square ruler is preferable, and you're going to trim it down to 2.5 inches so it matches those little 2.5 inch blocks that you cut earlier. Then you're going to lay it out. Lay it out per the pattern and take a picture just so you have it in the colors and everything that you have when you get ready to sew this all together. It's gorgeous. Okay, so the most challenging part of this whole thing is layout and piecing. So when you're piecing it or sewing all these little blocks together, you got to make sure you don't get the layout out of order. So what I'm doing this time that's a little bit different than normal is I'm going to just do 2 at a time like this. So I'm going to do sets of 2s all the way this way, and then I'm going to sew these 2 rows together. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. And I think that'll help me stay a little bit more organized. Some people are good enough where they can pile it up and just sew it together. I don't think I'm that good. So I'm going to do these 2 at a time. I'm going to leave it here on my table while I sew it together here on Jolene. I'll be honest, this worked for the first 2 rows. The next few rows I got off a little bit. I would go straight across 1 row at a time and then sew my rows together. I actually think that'll hold together better for matching up your seams. Once you get these 2 blocks together, iron them open. I do recommend ironing open your seams. I didn't do that on this and I really regretted it when I put the whole thing together because there were really bunchy seams. So this is a lot of rinse, wash, repeat as you go along on this pattern. Just a quick look. So these are the blocks laid out, not sewed together. These are my first 2 rows sewed together. See the significant loss? I lose almost like a block size worth from the seam allowance. So this will become a really nice size table topper, or you could make several of them and actually make a little quilt or a wall hanging or something like that. I'll be honest, I seam ripped a dozen times. And if you notice, I'm in 3 or 4 different outfits in this video because it took me 3 or 4 different sittings to get through it. Not because this is hard or long, just because I didn't have time to sit through the whole thing. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I went and got a headband. I figured that would help me. I got it in place. Now I gotta sew it all together. This is where it went awry last time. But we're gonna see if I can make this work. One more time. For the 3rd or 4th time. Okay, so once you piece the top and repiece it until you get it right, you're going to fuse it to the fusible fleece. So I like to put the side with the seams on the sticky side of the fusible fleece, and I'm going to go iron this and put it all into place, and then I'm going to trim off the edge of this fusible fleece. Okay, so there's enough fabric on this fat quarter. So the backing of this is just a fat quarter. There's enough fabric on this that I can probably do a turned binding. So I'm going to use a little bit of spray basting. You can see it. And I'm going to baste the back, which is just a sticky spray. And then I'm going to fold it back over like this and smooth it out. And I'll have it down. And you do the same thing to the other side, which I kind of already did. I'll give it another little squirt. Good. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 1/4 inch seam foot off, and I'm going to put on the stitch in the ditch foot. And when I put on the stitch in the ditch foot, super duper easy. Oops. String in there. Screw it on real tight. I am going to raise it up. Make sure you guys can see that. I use this here. I have a little knob at the top of Jolene, and I make it a little bit higher up so the tension's not as tight on this fabric. Then we just stitch in the ditch, and I'm going to use white thread because there's green and white and red, and I don't have anything but white that would match this. Okay, so this is really easy. You can do it a couple ways. My mom showed me I can use the stitch in the ditch foot to measure out and do like a 1/4 inch seam off, or I can go right in the ditch, and the ditch is where the seam is on this. And since this has pretty straight seams throughout, I'm just gonna do it in the ditch. What do you do if your seam is off? Like that? Well, my seam is way off on that one, but I'm just gonna sew right down and get back in the ditch. And there you have it. Table topper 19. I'm going to send it over to my mom to get the binding done. You can get yours at the Quilted Cow's website. The link is in my bio. Have a great day.